Welcome, Internet, to a psychoanalytic talk. And today I wanted to talk about Fairbairn's version of the Oedipus complex. So why do I want to talk about Fairbairn's version? It's because I find it very, very original, his take on the Oedipus complex, and very true for certain types of troubles or mental illnesses. And I'm going to explain why in this video. So first and foremost, I'm just going to do a quick recap of what is Freud's version of the Oedipus complex. Well, very simply, Freud's version is that the child is going to get attached to their parents, and when they get attached, they're going to develop a lot of feelings of aggression and feelings of love. Those feelings of love, prototypically, are going to be distributed to the mother, because there is a will to be with the mother and replace the father, becoming like a father with the mother, and then basically become a new father figure with the mother. So that's the fantasy, right? And when the father comes into the nod, he breaks it by basically imposing a separation that is also necessary to be reinforced by the mother, and the fact that she has to also bar off the Oedipus from the child and say that the child is not going to fulfill her, that only a third party, namely the father, but it can be another woman, it can be another person, so on and so forth, right? It's not binary, but that's how it works. Basically, there needs to be a third party to prevent fusion-like state of mother and child, very simply. And I could go into the female Oedipus complex, but I think that's going to be perhaps a little too much as an introduction. But however, the only thing you have to really remember of Freud's theory is that there's incestual wishes. Those incestual wishes are basically directed towards the mother, and the father comes in and stops it, basically ending the Oedipus complex and creating just something beyond that state. Very fundamentally, Fairbairn's version of the Oedipus complex is very interesting, because he's going to throw out quite a lot of those elements. Because for Fairbairn, the Oedipus complex is basically a second chance. Because what he's going to theorize is that the relationship with the mother is complete in of itself. It's a true, real relationship. And that relationship has every element of every posterior relationship, meaning all the other relationships that are going to come after are inherently linked to the mother. And for him, the Oedipus complex does not have the same value as for Freud. For Freud, it was really a fundamental separation. For Fairbairn, it's going to be a reenactment. Meaning that for Fairbairn, it's the second chance to make things right. Every failing, everything that didn't quite happen or should have happened in the relationship with the mother figure is going to be replayed with the father. And for him, basically, it is basically like throwing the dice again. Like, let's say you had a 1 or 2 on your dice. Well, you're going to throw it again in order to get a better score with the reactualization of the second object, like the father, prototypically. However, he says that there is a big risk for Fairbairn that the same relationship will be replayed exactly like with the father, meaning that even all the flaws, the faults, all of the bad elements are going to just come back and just be triggered again and again and again. That would reinstate the flaws of object relationships, and those flaws are gonna continue again and again. That's why for Fairbairn, the Oedipus complex is not necessarily Oedipal as such. It's a second chance, meaning that object A is going to be replacing object B, rather than object B cutting off object A. So it's very important to see the difference in the theories. And for me, what I find brilliant with Fairbairn is that I think he's right, but he's only right to the extent of humans, people that haven't been able to do an Oedipal setup, meaning that there was no third party to begin with. that the father figure or the third party was in fact second party, meaning that there was no otherness, there was just the same. And I think that, for example, for people who have a lot of abandonment anxiety, or people who have fusion anxieties, he's right. The father in this context, let's say the father, the second object, the third party, right, is going to be a desperate attempt in this pseudo-Oedipal state of trying to fix something that was not there or could not be there. And as such, it implies a lot of hope, but a lot of deception, because the child is going to expect everything from that second object. That the second object combined with the first object could be able to fix the whole of the relational object dynamic. However, what you have to keep in mind is that rarely, if not ever, happens. Sometimes it does, but it's not often the case. And when it does not, that creates a split within the ego. That famous split that's going to create three types of egos. The central ego, which is the better adapted ego, and the two sub-egos, which are unconscious in Fairbairn's theory. The anti-libidinal ego, also called internal saboteur in his early writings, and the libidinal ego. So basically, it's a chance to try, and the Oedipus complex for Fairbairn is a chance to try and reunite a bit of everything and reinforce the central ego in its relationship with the ideal object, which I've talked about many times on this channel. And very basically, I think his version of the Oedipus complex is paramount for us to understand that for some people it's not about finding limits, it's about reenacting the same fundamental relationship that should have been there in the first place, or that the flaws should not have been that present a second time. In a way, it reminds me a lot of trying to trigger a new event. In a way, it's like trying to go back to zero, Fairbairn's theory, and try and do what could not be done. And I think that is so incredibly rich, because it's true that I feel that what is lacking in Freud's Oedipus complex is the fact that it's not true for everyone, and it's something that has been observed by many clinicians, that some people are in modes of operation that are pre-Oedipal, meaning in early or archaic versions of functioning, in a way that where things are going to be much more split, split in persecution anxieties, abandonment issues, idealization, devaluation, and so on and so forth. And in those early and archaic modes of processing, the mind does not see an alternative, does not see a third party. It sees an extension of the first object, and in very regressed cases, it's even not the first object, it's the individual that sees himself in other objects. What other authors would call a narcissistic pseudopod, meaning that everyone is an extension of themselves. There is no such thing as an object. Well, in the case of Fairbairn, there is an object, but that object is always object A, the primary object. And the Oedipus complex is a fundamental second chance in order to try and save what was undone or what was hurt in relationship with the first and primary object. Therefore, I think that what we would call the third party in Fairbairn's system is object A bis, right? Meaning that it's just object A in a new version. Like if you play video games, it's going to talk to you. It's a bit like a DLC that comes and tries and fix the flaws and add a bit of new content, but it's not a new product or new game in of itself. And that's what Fairbairn's Oedipus complex is. And I find it very, very interesting, and perhaps one of the more essential and looked over theories of Fairbairn. His take on that complex is, I think, incredibly important and necessary if we were if we are to conceive of people who are in early object relations and who have developed more early defense mechanisms rather than Oedipal defense mechanisms. And that's something that I'm very, very interested in, and clinically I find it very pertinent. What his ideas, I think, are clinically very verifiable. And I think that that's no surprise coming from a man that worked with traumatic events and people who were traumatized, be it war veterans, children that were in child social services and taken out of their families, so massive trauma. And in that trauma, he saw that the Oedipal framework was fundamentally changed. And I think that instead of rejecting it, we should integrate it in our clinical and psychoanalytic thinking and make of it something that we can expand upon. And that is pretty much my take on the Fairbairn's take of the Oedipus complex. So Fairbairn's version is really an interesting version, and I think it should be talked about more, and that's partly why I'm doing this video. So I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.